Hello? Tonight, we're going to gently explore the life of Cleopatra, from her quiet beginnings to the height of her power. Relax, close your eyes, let your body rest, and listen as her story slowly unfolds in the calm rhythm of the ancient world. The soft golden light of early morning spread slowly across the ancient city of Alexandria, illuminating its grand buildings, quiet streets, and the gentle waves of the Mediterranean Sea. The air was calm, filled with the faint scent of saltwater, warm stone, and distant incense drifting from temples. Along the harbor, ships rested quietly, their sails folded, ropes swaying slightly in the soft breeze. Merchants moved slowly along the docks, arranging goods with careful, deliberate gestures, their movements blending seamlessly into the tranquil rhythm of the waking city. Fishermen checked their nets, their hands moving with practiced precision, each motion smooth and unhurried, reflecting the calm pulse of life along the coast. In the distance, the great lighthouse stood tall, its presence steady and reassuring, watching over the harbor and guiding ships through the gentle morning haze. Within the city, narrow streets began to fill with quiet activity. Citizens stepped out of their homes, carrying small baskets, jars, and tools, each movement part of a slow, harmonious flow. Children followed closely, observing and imitating, their steps light, their gestures careful and curious. The sounds of the city were soft and layered, footsteps on stone, the distant murmur of voices, the faint creak of wooden carts, all blending into a continuous, soothing rhythm. In the royal palace, where polished stone floors reflected the soft morning light, servants moved silently through wide corridors, arranging fabrics, carrying scrolls, and preparing the day with calm efficiency. Curtains swayed gently as the breeze passed through open windows, bringing with it the scent of the sea and the quiet hum of the city beyond the palace walls. It was here, within these calm and elegant surroundings, that Cleopatra began her early life. As a young girl, she moved quietly through the palace, her dark hair softly framing her face, her eyes attentive and observant. She listened carefully to conversations, to the voices of scholars, advisors, and tutors who filled the palace with knowledge and ideas. Her steps were slow and deliberate, her posture calm, as she explored the halls and courtyards, absorbing every detail of the world around her. In shaded courtyards, she watched as scribes carefully traced symbols onto papyrus, their reed pens gliding softly, each stroke precise and fluid. She observed scholars discussing languages, history, and philosophy, their voices calm and measured, echoing gently against stone columns. The rhythm of learning was steady and immersive, drawing her deeper into a world of knowledge and quiet understanding. Outside the palace, the city of Alexandria continued its slow awakening. Markets opened gradually, merchants displaying fabrics, pottery, and spices in muted colors. The soft light of the sun reflected off polished surfaces, highlighting textures and details in gentle tones. Citizens moved calmly between stalls, exchanging goods and quiet greetings, each interaction blending into the peaceful atmosphere. Cleopatra often stood at the edge of balconies, looking out over the city. From this quiet vantage point, she observed the movement of ships in the harbor, the flow of people through the streets, and the distant shimmer of the sea. The wind carried soft sounds upward, the call of a merchant, the splash of water against the docks, the distant rhythm of footsteps. Each sound layered gently, forming a continuous, calming background that seemed to slow time itself. Within the palace, her education continued. Tutors spoke softly, guiding her through lessons in language, mathematics, and the traditions of her land. Unlike many rulers before her, Cleopatra listened closely, her mind attentive, her curiosity steady. She learned not only from books and scrolls but from observing the world around her, from the quiet patterns of daily life that unfolded within and beyond the palace walls. As the day progressed, the sunlight shifted slowly across the marble floors, casting soft patterns that moved gently with time. Servants passed through halls with quiet efficiency, carrying trays, adjusting fabrics, and maintaining the calm order of the palace. The rhythm of their movements was steady and predictable, contributing to the overall sense of balance and tranquility. In the gardens, filled with soft greenery and flowing water, Cleopatra walked slowly, her steps light against the stone paths. Leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and the sound of water trickling through small fountains added to the serene atmosphere. She paused often, observing small details, the movement of birds, the sway of plants, the reflections of light on water. Each moment was quiet, immersive, and calm. Beyond the palace, Alexandria thrived in a gentle, continuous rhythm. Ships arrived and departed slowly, goods were exchanged, and life moved forward with steady precision. The city was alive, yet never rushed, each movement flowing naturally into the next. Cleopatra's early life unfolded within this environment, shaped by calm observation, steady learning, and the quiet rhythm of a world guided by tradition and order. As the sun began to climb higher in the sky, the warmth spread across the city, touching stone, water, and fabric alike. The gentle light illuminated every detail, reinforcing the calm and immersive atmosphere. Cleopatra continued to observe, to listen, and to learn, her presence quiet yet attentive, her mind absorbing the patterns and rhythms that would one day guide her path. The combination of soft light, layered sounds, and slow, deliberate movement created a world that invited stillness, reflection, and calm. And as the morning gently unfolded into the day, the story of Cleopatra's life began, not with urgency or noise, but with a quiet, steady rhythm, guiding the listener softly into the peaceful flow of the ancient world. As the sun rose higher above Alexandria, the city settled into a gentle, steady rhythm. Warm light flowed across marble walls, narrow streets, and the vast harbor where ships rested quietly between their journeys. The sea shimmered softly, reflecting the pale blue sky, its slow, rhythmic movement blending with the distant sounds of ropes creaking and water brushing against wooden hulls. Along the docks, merchants continued their calm preparations, arranging amphorae, baskets of grain, and folded textiles with careful precision. Each gesture was slow and deliberate, part of a continuous flow that defined the life of the city. Within the palace, Cleopatra's days unfolded in a similar rhythm, guided by quiet discipline and steady learning. She moved through long corridors lined with tall columns, her footsteps soft against polished stone. Light filtered gently through open windows, illuminating drifting curtains and casting subtle shadows that shifted slowly with the passing hours. Servants passed silently, carrying scrolls, water, and trays of fruit, their movements fluid and practiced, blending into the calm atmosphere. Cleopatra's education deepened as she grew older. Tutors spoke in measured tones, guiding her through complex ideas, ancient histories, and the languages of neighboring lands. Unlike many rulers of her time, she listened closely, absorbing not only the words but the rhythm behind them, the quiet meaning carried in tone and gesture. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and precise, reflecting the steady pace of her thoughts. In shaded rooms filled with scrolls, she studied the patterns of governance, trade, and diplomacy. Maps were unrolled slowly across wooden tables, showing distant lands connected by rivers, seas, and trade routes. Her fingers traced these paths gently, following the flow of goods and ideas, understanding how the world beyond Alexandria moved in its own quiet rhythm. Outside, the city continued its steady pulse. Markets were now fully alive, yet still calm. Merchants exchanged goods with soft voices, customers examined items with careful attention, and children moved between stalls, observing and learning. The scent of spices, baked bread, and sea air blended into a subtle, comforting presence. Artisans worked in small workshops, shaping clay, carving stone, and weaving fabrics. Their hands moved in slow, repetitive patterns, each motion precise, contributing to a soft, rhythmic background. Cleopatra often returned to the palace gardens, where the noise of the city faded into gentle quiet. Here, surrounded by greenery and the soft sound of water, she walked slowly along shaded paths. Fountains trickled steadily, creating a calming, continuous sound. Birds moved among the branches, their wings beating softly, their calls brief and delicate. She paused frequently, observing the small details, the way sunlight filtered through leaves, the way water reflected light, the way shadows shifted slowly across the ground. These moments of stillness shaped her understanding of the world, teaching her patience and attention. In the distance, the great library of Alexandria stood as a place of knowledge and quiet discovery. Though she was still young, its presence was felt throughout the city. Scholars moved in and out of its halls, carrying scrolls, exchanging ideas, and preserving knowledge with careful dedication. The influence of learning surrounded Cleopatra, weaving itself into her daily life, reinforcing the importance of thought, observation, and calm understanding. As the afternoon approached, the light softened slightly, casting a warm glow across the palace and city. Cleopatra sat with her tutors, listening as they spoke of rulers before her, of kingdoms rising and falling, of decisions made slowly and carefully. She learned that power was not only strength, but patience, awareness, and the ability to move with the rhythm of the world rather than against it. Servants brought cool water and simple food, placing them gently on low tables. The quiet clink of pottery, the soft rustle of fabric, and the distant murmur of the city created a layered, soothing soundscape. Cleopatra ate slowly, her movements measured, her thoughts calm and focused. Beyond the palace walls, ships began to move again, some preparing to leave, others arriving with goods from distant lands. The harbor remained steady and controlled, each movement guided by experienced hands, each action part of a larger, harmonious system. Sailors worked with quiet coordination, their gestures fluid and practiced, blending into the gentle rhythm of the sea. As the day continued, Cleopatra spent time with scrolls, her fingers tracing symbols, her eyes following lines of text. The soft scratch of reed pens nearby, the turning of papyrus, and the quiet voices of scholars created a calm, immersive environment. Knowledge was not rushed, it unfolded slowly, like the day itself, each idea connecting gently to the next. In the palace halls, shadows grew longer, stretching softly across floors and walls. The air cooled slightly, carrying with it the faint scent of evening approaching. Servants moved with the same steady rhythm, preparing spaces, lighting early lamps, maintaining the calm order of the palace. Cleopatra walked once more to a high balcony overlooking the city. From here, she watched the slow transformation of Alexandria as the day began to soften into evening. The light shifted from bright gold to warmer tones, reflecting off rooftops, streets, and the quiet sea. People below continued their movements, but more slowly now, their gestures relaxed, their pace unhurried. She observed everything in silence, her presence still, her mind attentive. The rhythm of the city, the movement of people, the gentle flow of the sea, all of it formed a continuous pattern, one she was beginning to understand deeply. It was not loud or forceful, but steady and enduring, like the passage of time itself. As the sun lowered further, the atmosphere became even more serene. The sound softened, the light mellowed, and the entire city seemed to exhale into a calm, unified rhythm. Cleopatra remained still for a moment longer, absorbing the scene before her, letting its quiet pattern settle within her thoughts. Her life, still in its early stages, was shaped by these moments, by observation, by patience, and by the gentle understanding of a world that moved not in haste, but in a slow, continuous flow. And as the light continued to fade, the story of her journey moved forward, carried softly by the same rhythm that guided the city of Alexandria, inviting the listener to follow, to relax, and to drift deeper into the calm unfolding of her life. As the evening light began to settle over Alexandria, a softer rhythm took hold of the city, one that moved more slowly, more quietly, as if the entire world was gently preparing to rest. The golden glow of the sun faded into warm amber tones, casting long, delicate shadows across the marble walls of the palace and the narrow streets below. The sea reflected this shifting light, its surface calm and steady, moving in slow, almost hypnotic waves that blended seamlessly with the distant sounds of the harbor. Within the palace, Cleopatra's life continued to unfold with quiet intention. She was no longer just observing the world around her, she was beginning to understand her place within it. Her movements remained calm and deliberate, her presence quiet yet attentive, as she listened more closely to the conversations that passed through the halls. Advisors spoke in measured voices about matters of governance, about alliances, trade, and the delicate balance of power that sustained the kingdom. Cleopatra listened carefully, her expression composed, her thoughts steady. She did not interrupt often, but when she spoke, her voice carried a quiet confidence, shaped by the knowledge she had gathered over time. In shaded chambers filled with scrolls and maps, she studied the structure of her kingdom. The Nile, flowing endlessly through Egypt, appeared again and again in these maps, its path steady and life-giving. Her fingers traced its course slowly, following its movement from the south to the north, understanding how deeply the rhythm of the river shaped the lives of her people. Each village, each field, each city depended on its gentle, predictable flow. Outside the palace, that same rhythm continued. Farmers worked along the fertile banks, their movement slow and practiced, guided by the cycles of the river and the sun. Boats moved steadily along the water, carrying grain, stone, and goods, their progress calm and uninterrupted. The entire land seemed connected by this quiet, continuous motion, a pattern that Cleopatra began to recognize as essential to maintaining balance and harmony. In the palace gardens, where soft shadows stretched across stone paths and fountains whispered gently, Cleopatra walked alone more often. Her thoughts moved slowly, like the water that flowed beside her, steady and reflective. She considered the lessons she had learned, the voices she had heard, and the subtle tension she could now begin to sense beneath the calm surface of palace life. For while the city and the river moved in harmony, the world of power within the palace was more complex, layered with quiet ambitions and careful decisions. Her father, the king, ruled with authority, but his position was not without challenges. Cleopatra observed this not through loud conflict, but through small details, the careful tone of advisors, the measured pauses in conversation, the way decisions were discussed slowly and deliberately. Nothing was rushed, yet everything carried weight. She began to understand that leadership required not only knowledge, but patience and awareness of these subtle currents. In the evenings, as lamps were lit along the corridors and the palace filled with soft, golden light, Cleopatra often sat quietly, listening to the distant sounds of the city. The murmur of voices, the soft movement of carts, the gentle rhythm of the sea, all of it formed a calming background, yet within it, she could now sense the deeper patterns of life and power. The Library of Alexandria continued to influence her thoughts. Scholars spoke of history, of rulers who had come before, of kingdoms that had risen and fallen. Their voices were calm, their words measured, yet filled with meaning. Cleopatra listened, absorbing these stories not as distant tales, but as lessons woven into the present. She began to see how the past flowed into the present, just as the Nile flowed through the land, connecting everything in a continuous, unbroken rhythm. As the night deepened, the palace grew quieter. Servants moved more softly, their footsteps barely audible against the stone floors. Curtains drifted gently in the cool night air, and the scent of the sea mixed with the faint aroma of oil lamps. Cleopatra stood once more at a balcony, looking out over Alexandria as it settled into rest. The city below was calm, its light scattered like small stars, its movement slow and steady. Ships in the harbor rested quietly, their forms outlined by the soft glow of lanterns. The water moved gently, reflecting the sky above, creating a sense of endless depth and stillness. In this quiet moment, Cleopatra's thoughts were clear and unhurried. She understood that her life, like the city and the river, would move forward in its own time, shaped by the rhythms she was only beginning to grasp. She did not rush toward the future, but allowed it to unfold, step by step, guided by observation and patience. The night air was cool and calm, wrapping the city in a gentle stillness. The sounds of the day had faded, replaced by a soft, continuous quiet that seemed to slow the passage of time itself. Cleopatra remained still for a moment longer, her gaze steady, her presence calm, absorbing the peaceful rhythm that surrounded her. And as the night carried on, her journey continued quietly, shaped by knowledge, awareness, and the subtle currents of a world that moved not with urgency, but with a slow, enduring grace, inviting the listener to follow, to relax, and to drift deeper into the unfolding story of her life. As the days passed gently over Alexandria, the rhythm of palace life continued, calm on the surface, yet carrying subtle shifts beneath. The sunlight still moved softly across marble floors and quiet corridors, and the distant sound of the sea remained steady and reassuring. But within the palace, conversations grew slightly more measured, pauses a little longer, glances a little more thoughtful. Nothing was abrupt, nothing was loud, yet something was slowly changing. Cleopatra, now older and more attentive, began to notice these small variations. She walked through the palace with the same calm steps, her posture relaxed, her gaze observant, yet her awareness had deepened. She listened more closely, not only to what was said, but to the tone, the silence between words, the careful way in which advisors chose their phrases. Her father's rule continued, but the balance of power around him was delicate. Advisors gathered in quiet rooms, discussing matters of stability, alliances, and the future of the kingdom. Their voices remained soft, their gestures controlled, yet the weight of their discussions could be felt in the stillness that followed each exchange. Cleopatra often remained nearby, listening quietly, absorbing the flow of these conversations as if they were part of the natural rhythm of the palace. In the city outside, life continued as it always had. The markets opened each morning, merchants arranged their goods, and citizens moved through the streets with calm purpose. The Nile flowed steadily, guiding farmers and fishermen in their daily work. From a distance, nothing seemed different. Yet Cleopatra understood now that beneath this steady surface, the future was slowly taking shape. In the palace gardens, she spent more time alone. The fountain still whispered softly, the leaves still swayed gently in the breeze, and the light still filtered through branches in delicate patterns. But her thoughts had grown more complex. She reflected on what she had learned, on the structure of her kingdom, on the stories of rulers before her. She understood that power did not appear suddenly, it emerged slowly, shaped by time, patience, and careful decisions. Her interactions with her siblings became more distant, more formal. Where once there had been shared spaces and quiet observation, there was now a subtle separation. Conversations were polite, gestures controlled, each movement measured. There was no open conflict, only a quiet awareness that each of them held a place within the future of the kingdom. Cleopatra accepted this without resistance. She did not rush forward, nor did she retreat. Instead, she remained steady, observing, learning, and adapting to the slow changes around her. In the evenings, as the palace filled with the soft glow of oil lamps, she often sat in silence, listening to the distant sounds of Alexandria. The murmur of the city, the gentle movement of the sea, the faint echo of footsteps along corridors, all of it created a layered, calming soundscape. Within this quiet, she allowed her thoughts to settle, to move slowly and clearly, like the river that sustained her land. Advisors continued to visit the palace, bringing news from distant regions. Their reports were delivered in calm, measured tones, describing trade routes, harvests, and the movements of neighboring powers. Cleopatra listened carefully, her attention focused not only on the words, but on the patterns they revealed. She began to see how each part of the kingdom was connected, how decisions in one place could ripple outward, affecting the balance of the whole. Her understanding deepened gradually, without urgency. She did not seek to control everything at once, instead, she allowed knowledge to gather naturally, forming a steady foundation. This quiet patience became one of her greatest strengths, though it was not yet fully visible to those around her. As the sun moved lower in the sky each day, casting warm, golden light across the palace and city, Cleopatra often returned to the balcony overlooking Alexandria. From this vantage point, she could see the harbor, the markets, the distant movement of people and ships. Everything appeared calm, ordered, and continuous. Yet she now understood that this harmony required constant care, careful decisions, and a deep awareness of the forces that shaped it. The sea stretched endlessly beyond the city, its surface calm and reflective. Ships moved slowly across it, their paths steady, guided by knowledge and experience. Cleopatra watched them often, understanding that like these ships, her own path would require patience, direction, and the ability to navigate through both calm and uncertainty. Within the palace, the quiet tension remained subtle, never breaking the calm atmosphere, yet always present in the careful way people moved and spoke. Cleopatra did not resist this change, she adapted to it, becoming more composed, more thoughtful, more aware of her surroundings. Her movements remained slow and deliberate, her voice calm and controlled, her presence steady. As night approached, the palace settled into silence once more. Lamps flickered gently, casting soft shadows along the walls. Servants moved quietly, completing their tasks with practiced ease. The scent of oil lamps and distant sea air filled the corridors, creating a familiar and calming environment. Cleopatra stood once again beneath the open sky, now filled with stars. The city below was quiet, its movement slowed, its light scattered softly across the darkness. The Nile, though unseen from this height, continued its steady flow, a constant presence that guided the land. In this stillness, Cleopatra felt the slow movement of time, the gradual unfolding of her life and her future. Nothing was rushed, nothing forced. Each moment followed the next with gentle precision, like the rhythm of the river or the movement of the stars. And as she stood there, calm and thoughtful, her journey continued to take shape, not through sudden change, but through quiet understanding, steady observation, and the slow, inevitable flow of events that would one day lead her toward her destiny. The night wrapped around the city, soft and peaceful, inviting rest, reflection, and calm. And within that stillness, Cleopatra remained present, grounded in the gentle rhythm of her world, as the story of her life moved forward, step by step, in perfect, unhurried harmony. As the gentle rhythm of days continued over Alexandria, the slow unfolding of events within the palace began to guide Cleopatra toward a new phase of her life. The city outside remained calm and steady, the Nile flowing as it always had, the markets opening and closing in quiet repetition. Yet within the palace walls, the balance that had once felt stable was gradually shifting, like the subtle movement of sand beneath a calm surface. Cleopatra, now no longer a child, moved through the palace with quiet confidence. Her steps remained slow and measured, her presence composed, yet there was now a deeper awareness in the way she observed the world around her. She listened carefully to the voices of advisors, to the reports brought from distant regions, to the subtle tones that revealed more than the words themselves. When her father's strength began to fade, the palace grew even quieter. Conversations were held in more private spaces, voices lowered, decisions made with careful consideration. There was no sudden change, no loud declaration, only a gradual transition, like the soft dimming of light at the end of the day. Cleopatra remained calm through it all, her thoughts steady, her movements unhurried. She understood that moments of change required patience, not haste. As the time came for her to step closer to power, she did so not with force, but with quiet certainty. Her presence among advisors became more frequent, her voice more often heard, though always calm, always controlled. She did not seek to dominate the room, but to understand it, to move within its rhythm, to guide rather than disrupt. The palace itself seemed to adjust to her presence. Servants moved with the same fluid grace, but now their attention followed her as well. Advisors listened more closely when she spoke. The flow of information, once centered elsewhere, began to pass gently through her. Outside the palace, Alexandria continued its steady life. Ships arrived and departed, their sails catching the soft light of the sun. Merchants traded goods in the markets, their voices calm and measured. Farmers worked along the Nile, guided by its endless, predictable flow. To the people, life remained familiar, unchanged, yet the quiet shift within the palace was slowly shaping the future of all. Cleopatra spent long hours studying maps, scrolls, and records. Her fingers traced the lines of the Nile once more, but now with a deeper understanding of what it meant to sustain a kingdom. She examined trade routes, alliances, and resources, her mind moving carefully through each detail. Knowledge, gathered slowly over time, now began to take form as quiet confidence. In the palace gardens, she still found moments of stillness. The fountains whispered softly, the leaves moved gently in the breeze, and the light filtered through branches in calm patterns. Here, she allowed herself to pause, to breathe, to reflect. Even as responsibility grew, she did not abandon the rhythm that had shaped her. Instead, she carried it with her, allowing it to guide her decisions and actions. Her relationship with those around her remained measured. Allies and rivals alike were observed with the same calm attention. She did not rush to judge or react. Instead, she listened, watched, and understood. This quiet patience gave her a strength that was not immediately visible, but deeply rooted. As the sun moved across the sky each day, casting warm light over the palace and city, Cleopatra's role continued to expand. She attended discussions of governance, listened to reports of trade and agriculture, and began to influence decisions with subtle guidance. Her voice remained soft, but it carried clarity and purpose. The advisors, once simply voices she listened to, now became individuals she worked alongside. She understood their strengths, their perspectives, and the role each played within the greater whole. Rather than disrupt this structure, she moved within it, aligning herself with its rhythm. In the evenings, as lamps were lit and the palace settled into a gentle glow, Cleopatra often returned to the balcony overlooking Alexandria. The city below moved with the same calm precision, its people following the familiar patterns of daily life. The sea reflected the fading light, and the harbor remained steady and quiet. She stood there in silence, observing, absorbing, allowing the vastness of the world before her to settle into her thoughts. Power, she understood, was not a sudden force. It was a gradual presence, built over time through awareness, patience, and the ability to remain steady while everything else slowly shifted. The Nile, ever flowing, reminded her of this truth. It did not rush, yet it shaped the land completely. As night fell and the sky filled with stars, the palace grew still once more. Servants moved quietly, completing their tasks. The scent of oil lamps and the distant sea filled the air. Cleopatra walked slowly through the corridors, her footsteps soft, her mind calm. She felt the weight of responsibility, but it did not overwhelm her. Instead, it settled gently, becoming part of her, like the rhythm of the city, like the flow of the river. Her journey into power had begun, not with noise or force, but with quiet certainty. Each step she took was deliberate, each decision measured, each moment aligned with the steady rhythm that had guided her since childhood. And as the night deepened, wrapping Alexandria in soft darkness, Cleopatra remained calm and composed, moving forward not in haste, but in harmony with the slow, continuous flow of her world, inviting the listener to follow, to relax, and to drift deeper into the unfolding story of her life. As the slow rhythm of life continued across Alexandria, a new presence began to approach from beyond the horizon, carried gently across the waters of the Mediterranean. Ships moved steadily toward the harbor, their sails catching the soft light, their motion calm and deliberate. Among them came a figure whose name traveled quietly ahead of him, spoken in measured tones within the palace halls. Julius Caesar, a leader from a distant land, was drawing closer, his journey unfolding not with sudden force, but as part of the continuous, flowing rhythm of the world. Within the palace, the atmosphere remained composed, yet more attentive. Advisors gathered in quiet chambers, speaking softly of this arrival, of what it might mean, of how the delicate balance of power might shift. Cleopatra listened with calm focus, her expression steady, her thoughts moving slowly and clearly. She did not rush to act. Instead, she allowed the moment to unfold, observing its patterns, understanding its place within the greater flow of her life. Outside, the city continued as it always had. Merchants arranged their goods, fishermen tended their nets, and the Nile flowed with its steady, life-giving rhythm. The arrival of ships was not unusual, yet this moment carried a subtle weight, one that blended gently into the ongoing life of Alexandria without disrupting its calm surface. Cleopatra moved through the palace with quiet purpose. Her steps remained slow, her gestures controlled, her presence composed. She understood that this meeting, when it came, would not be defined by urgency, but by awareness and timing. Like the river, it would follow its course naturally. In the shaded rooms where maps and scrolls were laid out, she studied the lands from which Caesar came. Her fingers traced the outlines of distant territories, following the paths of rivers and roads, understanding how this world connected to her own. Knowledge guided her thoughts, allowing her to approach the unknown with calm clarity rather than uncertainty. As the day softened into evening, the light over Alexandria shifted into warm amber tones. Ships in the harbor were now still, their journeys paused, their forms reflected gently in the water. The air was calm, carrying the faint scent of salt and stone. It was in this quiet moment that Cleopatra prepared to meet Caesar. Her approach was not rushed. She moved with the same steady rhythm that had guided her all her life. Her appearance was simple yet elegant, her movements fluid, her presence calm and assured. She understood that influence did not come from force, but from presence, from the ability to remain steady while the world shifted around her. The meeting itself unfolded quietly, without spectacle. In a softly lit chamber, where shadows moved gently along the walls, Cleopatra entered with calm confidence. Caesar, having traveled far, carried the presence of someone accustomed to command, yet even he was part of this moment's slow unfolding. Their first exchange was not loud or dramatic, but measured and composed. Words were spoken carefully, voices calm, each listening as much as speaking. Cleopatra observed him as she observed everything, with patience, with attention to detail, with an understanding that meaning often lay beneath the surface. Caesar, in turn, recognized something in her presence, a steadiness, a clarity, a quiet strength that did not need to announce itself. Around them, the palace remained still. Servants moved silently, lamps flickered softly, and the distant sounds of the city drifted faintly through open windows. The meeting became part of this larger rhythm, not separate from it. As they spoke, the world beyond continued its steady motion. The Nile flowed, the sea moved gently, and the city breathed in its calm, continuous pattern. Cleopatra's thoughts remained clear. She did not rush to decisions, nor did she allow herself to be carried away by the significance of the moment. Instead, she remained grounded, present, aware. She understood that this connection, like all things, would unfold over time, shaped by patience and careful movement. In the days that followed, their interactions continued, each meeting calm and deliberate. Conversations were held in quiet spaces, where ideas could flow freely without interruption. Cleopatra shared her knowledge of Egypt, of its people, its rhythms, its history. Caesar spoke of distant lands, of journeys, of the structure of his own world. Their exchange was steady, balanced, neither dominating the other, but moving together in a shared rhythm of understanding. Outside, Alexandria remained unchanged. The markets continued, the harbor moved gently, and the Nile sustained the land as it always had. Yet within the palace, something new had been introduced, not a disruption, but a subtle shift, like a new current joining a familiar flow. Cleopatra remained composed through it all. Her decisions were guided not by emotion or haste, but by the same quiet awareness that had shaped her life from the beginning. She moved carefully, observing, listening, allowing each moment to reveal its place within the greater whole. As evening returned once more, the palace filled with soft light. Cleopatra stood at the balcony again, looking out over the city. The sea reflected the fading sun, ships rested quietly, and the streets below moved with their familiar calm. Behind her, within the palace, conversations continued softly, shaping the future in ways that were not yet fully visible. She remained still, her presence calm, her thoughts steady. The arrival of Caesar had not disrupted her world, it had simply become part of it, another thread woven into the continuous fabric of her life. And as the light faded into night, and the city settled into its gentle rhythm, Cleopatra allowed the moment to pass naturally, without resistance, without urgency. Like the Nile, like the passing of time, her story continued to flow forward, calm and unbroken, guiding the listener deeper into rest, into stillness, into the quiet unfolding of history itself. As the days passed gently over Alexandria, the presence of Julius Caesar became a quiet part of the palace's rhythm, blending seamlessly into the calm flow of life. Nothing felt rushed, nothing forced. Instead, like the steady movement of the Nile, everything unfolded with a natural and continuous pace. Cleopatra moved through her days with the same composed grace, her steps slow, her voice calm, her awareness deepening with each passing moment. The palace, with its wide corridors and softly lit chambers, became a space where ideas and intentions flowed quietly between her and Caesar. Their conversations were not filled with urgency, but with careful thought, each word chosen with intention, each silence carrying meaning. Cleopatra listened as much as she spoke, her gaze steady, her presence grounded. Caesar, accustomed to command, found himself drawn into this slower rhythm, adapting to the calm, deliberate pace that defined her world. Outside, Alexandria continued its steady life. The markets opened and closed in their familiar cycle, merchants arranging goods with practiced movements, voices soft and measured. Along the harbor, ships rested and departed, their sails moving gently in the breeze. The sea remained calm, reflecting the shifting light of the day, its surface smooth and endless. The Nile flowed as it always had, guiding farmers, sustaining the land, and reinforcing the quiet continuity of life. Within this stable world, Cleopatra's position grew stronger, not through sudden change, but through gradual alignment. Advisors began to look to her more often, their voices directed toward her with quiet respect. Decisions were made with her presence at the center, though she never imposed herself. Instead, she guided gently, allowing ideas to settle and form naturally. Her strength lay in her ability to remain still while understanding everything that moved around her. Caesar observed this carefully. He saw how Cleopatra's influence was not loud, but deeply rooted, shaped by patience and awareness. In her presence, power did not feel like force, it felt like balance. Their connection grew within this atmosphere, not as a sudden bond, but as a steady understanding that developed over time. They walked together through the palace gardens, where fountains whispered softly and leaves moved gently in the breeze. Their conversations continued in low tones, their steps slow, their gestures relaxed. Cleopatra shared the rhythms of her land, the importance of the Nile, the traditions that guided her people. Caesar spoke of distant territories, of roads and cities, of systems that connected vast regions. Their worlds were different, yet they found a quiet harmony between them. In shaded chambers, where scrolls and maps covered wide tables, they studied together. Cleopatra's fingers traced the familiar paths of Egypt, while Caesar pointed to lands beyond, their movement slow and deliberate. Knowledge passed between them not as instruction, but as exchange, each learning from the other in a calm and balanced flow. The palace itself seemed to settle into this new rhythm. Servants moved with the same quiet efficiency, yet there was a sense of alignment in the way everything functioned. Conversations flowed smoothly, decisions formed without conflict, and the atmosphere remained calm and controlled. Outside, the city remained unchanged. Citizens moved through their daily routines, unaware of the subtle shifts within the palace. The markets remained steady, the harbor calm, the Nile constant. Life continued in its gentle, predictable rhythm, providing a stable foundation for everything that unfolded within the palace walls. As the sun moved across the sky each day, casting warm light over the city, Cleopatra's confidence continued to grow. Her voice carried quiet authority, her decisions reflected careful thought, and her presence brought a sense of stability to those around her. She did not seek recognition, yet it came naturally, shaped by her steady and composed nature. Caesar, too, adapted to this environment. His movement slowed, his voice softened, and his approach became more measured. In Cleopatra's world, power was not displayed, it was understood. And within this understanding, he found a different kind of strength, one that did not rely on force, but on balance and awareness. In the evenings, as the palace filled with the soft glow of oil lamps, Cleopatra often stood at the balcony once more. The city below moved in its familiar rhythm, the sea reflecting the fading light, the streets calm and steady. Caesar sometimes stood beside her, both of them silent, observing the world below. There was no need for constant words. The moment itself carried a quiet meaning, shaped by presence and shared understanding. The air was cool, the breeze gentle, carrying the faint scent of the sea and the distant murmur of the city. Everything felt connected, part of a continuous flow that moved without interruption. Cleopatra remained grounded in this rhythm, allowing it to guide her thoughts and actions. As night settled over Alexandria, the palace grew quiet. Servants completed their tasks, footsteps softened, and the light dimmed into gentle shadows. Cleopatra walked slowly through the corridors, her presence calm, her mind clear. She felt no need to rush, no pressure to act beyond what was necessary. Everything would unfold in its own time. Her journey, once shaped by observation and learning, was now guided by quiet influence and steady presence. With Caesar beside her, not as a force of disruption but as part of the same flow, her path continued to take shape. And as the night deepened, wrapping the city in soft stillness, Cleopatra remained at ease, moving forward with calm certainty, allowing the story of her life to unfold gently, step by step, in perfect harmony with the slow, timeless rhythm of the world around her. As time continued its slow and steady passage, the rhythm of life in Alexandria remained calm, yet the world beyond its walls began to shift once more. The presence of Julius Caesar, which had become a quiet part of Cleopatra's daily life, gradually faded as his journey led him back across the sea. His departure was not marked by sudden change, but by a gentle transition, like the slow movement of tides returning to their natural course. Cleopatra remained composed, her posture calm, her thoughts steady, as she observed this change with the same patience that had guided her all along. The palace returned to a quieter rhythm, though something within it had evolved. Cleopatra now stood more firmly at its center, her presence no longer emerging, but fully established. Advisors continued to gather, their voices soft and measured, their attention naturally drawn toward her. Decisions unfolded with calm precision, guided by her steady understanding of the kingdom and its needs. Outside, Alexandria remained as it had always been. The harbor welcomed ships with slow, deliberate movement. Merchants arranged their goods in markets filled with soft colors and gentle sounds. The Nile flowed endlessly, its waters sustaining the land with quiet reliability. Life continued, unchanged on the surface, yet beneath it, Cleopatra's influence shaped the direction of the kingdom with subtle strength. In the palace gardens, she walked alone once more, her steps light, her gaze thoughtful. The fountains whispered softly, leaves swayed gently, and the air carried the familiar scent of water and greenery. These moments of solitude allowed her to reflect, not with urgency, but with calm awareness. She understood that every phase of life, like every cycle of the river, had its time. News from distant lands arrived quietly, carried by travelers and messengers who spoke in measured tones. Cleopatra listened carefully, absorbing the patterns within their words. The world beyond Egypt was always moving, always shifting, yet she did not allow it to disturb the steady rhythm she maintained within her kingdom. Instead, she adapted gently, aligning herself with these changes without losing balance. It was during this time that another presence began to approach from afar, carried across the same calm waters that had once brought Caesar. Mark Antony, a figure of influence from the distant Roman world, moved steadily toward Egypt. His name was spoken softly within the palace, not with urgency, but with quiet curiosity. Cleopatra listened as she always did, her expression calm, her thoughts measured. She did not rush to anticipate what this meeting would bring. Like all things, it would unfold in its own time. As the days passed, the light over Alexandria shifted gradually from morning gold to afternoon warmth, then into the soft hues of evening. Cleopatra continued her routines, her movements deliberate, her presence steady. She attended to matters of governance, listened to advisors, and walked through the palace and gardens with the same calm awareness that had defined her life. The arrival of Mark Antony, when it came, was not disruptive. It blended into the ongoing rhythm of the city, another moment in the continuous flow of history. Cleopatra prepared to meet him as she had before, with quiet confidence, with patience, and with a deep understanding of the importance of presence. Their first meeting unfolded in a softly lit space, where shadows moved gently across the walls and the air carried the calm scent of oil lamps. Cleopatra entered slowly, her posture relaxed, her gaze steady. Antony, though different in demeanor from Caesar, adapted to the same atmosphere of calm and measured interaction. Their voices remained low, their gestures controlled, their exchange unfolding without haste. Cleopatra observed him carefully, just as she had observed everything in her life. She noted the rhythm of his speech, the way he moved, the tone behind his words. Antony, in turn, sensed her composure, her clarity, and the quiet strength that defined her presence. Their connection, like all things in Cleopatra's world, developed gradually, shaped by time and shared understanding. Outside, Alexandria continued its steady life. The Nile flowed, the harbor moved gently, and the markets remained calm and ordered. Citizens followed their routines, unaware of the subtle shifts within the palace. Life continued in its gentle rhythm, providing a stable foundation for the changes taking place. Cleopatra's role grew even more defined. Her influence was now fully integrated into the structure of the kingdom. Advisors looked to her not only for guidance, but for stability. Her decisions were calm, her approach measured, her understanding deep. She did not seek to control every detail, but allowed the natural rhythm of the kingdom to guide her actions. In the evenings, she once again stood at the balcony overlooking the city. The sea reflected the fading light, ships rested quietly, and the streets below moved with familiar calm. Sometimes Antony stood nearby, their presence shared in silence, observing the same steady world. Words were not always necessary. The moment itself carried meaning, shaped by stillness and awareness. The air remained soft, the breeze gentle, carrying the scent of the sea and the distant sounds of the city. Everything felt connected, part of a continuous flow that moved without interruption. Cleopatra remained grounded in this rhythm, allowing it to guide her through each new phase of her life. As night settled once more over Alexandria, the palace grew quiet. Lamps flickered softly, shadows blended into the walls, and the sounds of the day faded into a gentle stillness. Cleopatra walked slowly through the corridors, her steps calm, her mind at ease. Her journey had moved through many phases, learning, observing, rising into power, and now continued with the same steady flow. The presence of Antony did not disrupt her world, it became part of it, another thread woven into the fabric of her life. And as the night deepened, wrapping the city in soft darkness, Cleopatra remained calm and composed, moving forward not with urgency, but with quiet certainty, allowing the story of her life to continue unfolding gently, guiding the listener deeper into rest, into stillness, into the peaceful rhythm of history itself. As the quiet rhythm of life continued to flow through Alexandria, the passage of time brought with it a gradual shift, not abrupt or overwhelming, but steady and inevitable, like the slow movement of the Nile. Cleopatra remained at the center of her world, her presence calm, her thoughts clear, her actions guided by the same patience that had shaped her from the beginning. Yet beyond the peaceful surface of her kingdom, distant currents were beginning to move more strongly, carried across lands and seas in ways that could not be fully seen, only gently felt. The days in Alexandria remained serene. The harbor welcomed ships with its usual calm, the markets opened with soft voices and careful gestures, and the river continued its endless flow. Citizens moved through their routines, unaware of the larger shifts unfolding far beyond their daily lives. Within the palace, however, the atmosphere grew slightly more reflective. Advisors spoke in quiet tones of distant changes, of movements within the Roman world, of decisions made far away that would slowly ripple outward. Cleopatra listened with the same steady attention, her expression composed, her thoughts measured. She did not react with urgency. Instead, she allowed the information to settle, to form a clear understanding over time. Her connection with Mark Antony continued, shaped by shared moments and quiet exchanges. They walked together through the palace gardens, where fountains whispered softly and the evening light cast gentle shadows across the paths. Their conversations remained calm, thoughtful, and unhurried. Cleopatra spoke of Egypt, of its rhythms, its traditions, and the quiet strength that came from understanding its flow. Antony spoke of distant lands, of shifting alliances, and of the complexity of the world beyond. Their connection was steady, yet the world around them was slowly changing. Cleopatra sensed this, not as a sudden threat, but as a gradual transformation, like the slow darkening of the sky at the end of the day. In the shaded chambers of the palace, maps were once again unrolled across tables. Cleopatra's fingers traced familiar paths, but now her understanding reached further, beyond Egypt, into the broader world. She saw how everything was connected, how decisions made far away could influence the balance within her own kingdom. Still, she remained calm, grounded in the rhythm she knew best. Outside, life continued in its gentle pattern. Farmers worked along the Nile, their movements slow and practiced. Fishermen tended their nets, boats drifted quietly, and merchants arranged their goods with care. The city remained peaceful, its daily life unchanged, even as the larger world shifted beyond its horizon. As the sun moved across the sky each day, casting its warm light over Alexandria, Cleopatra continued her duties with steady precision. She listened to advisors, guided decisions, and maintained the balance of her kingdom. Her strength was not in force, but in consistency, in her ability to remain calm while everything around her slowly evolved. In the evenings, she returned to the balcony overlooking the city. The sea stretched endlessly before her, reflecting the fading light. Ships rested quietly, and the streets below moved with their familiar calm. Sometimes Antony stood beside her, both of them silent, observing the world below. The air was soft, the breeze gentle, carrying the distant sounds of the city and the steady rhythm of the sea. Yet within this calm, there was a deeper awareness, a sense that the balance they had known was slowly shifting. Not breaking, not collapsing, but changing, as all things do with time. Cleopatra accepted this without resistance. She understood that nothing remained the same forever, that even the Nile, though constant, changed its levels, its flow, its presence with the passing seasons. Her thoughts remained clear, her emotion steady, her presence grounded. She did not allow uncertainty to disturb her calm. Instead, she embraced the natural progression of events, trusting in the rhythm that had guided her life. Within the palace, the atmosphere remained composed. Servants moved quietly, advisors spoke in measured tones, and decisions were made with careful thought. Yet beneath it all, there was a quiet awareness that the world beyond Egypt was becoming more active, more complex. Cleopatra did not rush to respond. She allowed herself to observe, to understand, to prepare in her own calm and deliberate way. As night approached, the city softened into stillness. Lamps flickered gently, shadows stretched across walls, and the sounds of the day faded into a quiet hum. Cleopatra walked slowly through the corridors, her footsteps soft, her mind at ease. She had lived a life shaped by observation, by patience, by the ability to move with the flow of time rather than against it. Now, as the world around her began to shift more noticeably, she remained the same, calm, composed, and aware. The stars appeared above Alexandria, scattered across the dark sky, their light soft and distant. The Nile flowed unseen in the darkness, its presence constant, its rhythm unchanged. Cleopatra stood once more in the quiet night, her gaze steady, her thoughts clear. She understood that her story, like all stories, was moving toward its natural conclusion. Not with sudden force, but with the same gentle progression that had guided every moment before. And as the night deepened, wrapping the city in calm and stillness, Cleopatra remained present, grounded in the rhythm of her world, allowing the final chapters of her life to unfold slowly, peacefully, and with the same quiet grace that had defined her journey from the very beginning. As the final phase of Cleopatra's life unfolded, the world around her moved with the same slow and steady rhythm that had always guided her journey. The city of Alexandria remained calm, its streets quiet, its harbor still, its people continuing their daily lives in peaceful repetition. The Nile flowed endlessly through the land, its waters constant, its presence unchanging, a reminder that even as time moved forward, some rhythms remained eternal. Cleopatra, now shaped by years of experience, carried herself with the same composed presence that had defined her from the beginning. Her steps were slow, her voice calm, her thoughts clear. She had lived through moments of learning, of rising influence, of connection and change, and now she stood at the quiet edge of her story, not with fear or urgency, but with a deep sense of understanding. Within the palace, the atmosphere was gentle and still. Advisors spoke softly, their voices low and measured, their movements careful and deliberate. There was no chaos, no sudden disruption, only a quiet awareness that time was continuing its natural course. Cleopatra listened as she always had, her attention steady, her mind calm. She did not resist what was coming. Instead, she accepted it as part of the same flow that had guided her entire life. Outside, the city remained unchanged. Merchants arranged their goods in the markets, their gestures slow and familiar. Fishermen moved along the riverbanks, tending to their nets with practiced ease. Children played softly in the streets, their laughter gentle and distant. Life continued, steady and predictable, unaffected by the quiet transition taking place within the palace walls. In the gardens, where fountains still whispered and leaves swayed softly in the breeze, Cleopatra walked once more. The air was warm and calm, carrying the faint scent of water and earth. She paused beside a fountain, watching the gentle ripples spread across its surface. The movement was slow, continuous, and peaceful, mirroring the rhythm she had followed throughout her life. Her thoughts were not filled with regret or urgency. Instead, they moved gently, reflecting on the path she had walked. She had learned, observed, and adapted. She had guided her kingdom with patience and awareness. She had understood the importance of balance, of moving with time rather than against it. And now, as her journey approached its end, she remained true to that understanding. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting warm golden light across the city, Cleopatra returned to the balcony overlooking Alexandria. The view was as it had always been, the sea stretching into the distance, the harbor calm, the streets below moving in their familiar rhythm. Ships rested quietly, their sails still, their reflections soft on the water. The world continued, steady and unbroken. She stood there in silence, her gaze calm, her presence grounded. The breeze moved gently around her, carrying the distant sounds of the city, the murmur of voices, the soft movement of carts, the endless rhythm of life continuing. Everything felt connected, part of a larger pattern that extended far beyond any single moment. As evening approached, the light softened into warm amber tones, and the city began to settle into its quiet nighttime rhythm. Lamps were lit along the streets and within the palace, their glow gentle and steady. Shadows stretched across the walls, blending softly with the fading light. Cleopatra moved slowly through the palace one final time, her footsteps light, her presence calm. She passed through the familiar corridors, the shaded rooms, the quiet spaces that had shaped her life. Each place carried a memory, not as something to hold on to, but as part of the continuous flow that had brought her to this moment. The night deepened gradually, wrapping Alexandria in soft darkness. The stars appeared above, scattered across the sky, their light distant and steady. The Nile flowed unseen, its rhythm unchanged, its presence eternal. Cleopatra came to rest in a quiet space, surrounded by the gentle stillness of the night. There was no urgency, no struggle, only calm acceptance, a peaceful alignment with the natural course of time. Her breathing slowed, her thoughts quieted, and her presence softened into stillness. The world around her continued, just as it always had. The river flowed, the city rested, and the stars moved slowly across the sky. Cleopatra's story did not end with noise or disruption, but with the same quiet grace that had defined every moment before. A gentle transition, a soft closing of a life lived in harmony with its time. And as the night carried on, the rhythm of ancient Egypt remained, steady and unbroken. The Nile continued to flow, the city would awaken again with the rising sun, and life would move forward in its calm, continuous pattern. Cleopatra, now part of that timeless flow, left behind not a moment of sudden change, but a lasting presence woven into the gentle rhythm of history. The soft sounds of the night, the distant water, the quiet breeze, the faint echo of life, formed a soothing lullaby, guiding the listener into deeper rest. And as everything settled into stillness, the story faded gently, allowing the mind to relax, the body to rest, and sleep to come naturally, carried by the calm, endless rhythm of the ancient world.